two roads that Luke could have taken as a young man. He takes the wrong road, and whatever amount of years it is later in The Last Jedi for the character, he has two choices again, and he takes the wrong road.
I'm not afraid.
You will be. You will be.
So in today's video, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than what I normally do. I'm going to be doing this kind of off rip. It's not so much scripted, just my unfiltered thoughts on what I think is pretty much Disney's biggest mistake with George Lucas and Luke Skywalker, the two most important characters, or rather the most important character and the creator of Star Wars, and how Disney pretty much just mishandled this character. And I know it's something that's been harped on quite a bit, but the reason this take is different and worth paying attention to is because it derives from the Paul Duncan Archives, and I have the XXL version, which is I think almost 600 pages, and this particular version covers the original movies and has so many bits of information that aren't really out there in circulation because it's bounded to this actual physical book, and it's not available for Kindle or iPad consumption, just the physical copy itself. So I was actually just doing some research for a Yoda theory video, and I came across this really interesting piece in the Paul Duncan Star Wars Archives. And for those of you who do have it or are thinking about getting it, turn to page 378 and 379 so you can follow along with me. But for those of you who can't, feel free to read along with me here. So this pretty much covers the scene where Yoda and Luke are trained together on Dagobah. Not for the first time, but at about the point where Luke starts to understand and have a little bit more of a grasp on the Force. In the clearing behind Yoda's house, Luke is standing on one hand again, but now Luke's face shows less strain and more concentration. Yoda is sitting in front of the young warrior, staring at his face. On the side of the clearing, two equipment cases slowly rise into the air. R2 is watching, humming to himself when suddenly he rises into the air. His little legs are kicking desperately and his head turns frantically, looking for help. Suddenly Luke holds 4 fingers off the ground as he is balancing on his thumb. We see Yoda laugh for the first time. Yoda then goes on to say, Good, now be calm. Through the Force, things you will see, other places, other thoughts, the future, the past, old friends long gone. So at this point, Luke sees the danger that his friends are in, right? Han, Leia, Chewie. And if you guys remember correctly, after that, Luke breaks his concentration, everything kind of falls apart, and he's in a state of shock. He's in dismay. He just saw a vision of his friends being hurt. And this is where things get interesting. Notice the text in italics here. And this is where this video becomes very important and is the crux and main point of the video. In the dialogue that follows, Luke resolves to break his training so that he can try to save his friends. However, by staying and completing his training as Kenobi and Yoda planned, he could save the galaxy. Irvin Kershner elaborates. He says, the decision is the element of ambiguity that makes the picture's content so rich. His decisions can be seen as a character strength or a character weakness, depending on how you look at it. What's more moral, to try to save the world or to attempt to rescue the friends closest to your heart? That is the moral dilemma at the root of the matter. So for the discussion, what really happens after? Well, even though Kershner says there's a moral ambiguity, it's clear that the right choice is that Luke probably should have stayed behind, completed his training. Though it remains to be seen if he would have saved the galaxy this way, he would have been better trained, he would have heeded the advice of his masters, he would have avoided the mistakes of his father and Anakin Skywalker, he wouldn't have lost his hand, and he would have been ready to confront Vader and Palpatine in a more holistic sense. But there's something more important here that needs to be talked about. In The Last Jedi, Disney, Lucasfilm, Rian Johnson, they kind of just make Luke Skywalker the same Luke Skywalker as when he was an untrained Jedi apprentice still, right? I mean, think about it. In The Last Jedi and in The Force Awakens, the premise is that Luke runs away from his problems. He cowers in fear of what could happen and in shame of what he's done. And he's kind of the same exact character as he is in The Empire Strikes Back when he's just beginning to train to become this hero. And I suppose he knows he's supposed to be this hero at some point. But more importantly, it's the text in italics that really raises a question. And it just highlights the problem that Disney has with Luke Skywalker and why The Last Jedi is such a problematic film and why it kind of just breaks the franchise apart. So again, let's go back to this. However, by staying and completing his training as Kenobi and Yoda planned, he could have saved the galaxy. Now, part of life is learning from one's mistakes, and I just think that had Disney followed a regular progression for this prolific, Messiah-like character, who made mistakes that Luke would have learned from them. But all we find out is that Luke didn't really learn anything, right? It takes him running away from his nephew. It takes him abandoning. Not only does he regress to the point of not helping his friends, but he just abandons them, right? He goes to this desolate island in the middle of nowhere and just leaves everybody behind. And it's such a character regression from where the character originally was in the 1970s and 1980s. And it's a testament to just how incompetent this character is being handled. The fact that these executives and these directors couldn't go back and just take a look at something like this, confer with a George Lucas, confer with a Paul Duncan. However, by staying and completing his training, he could have saved the galaxy. Two roads that Luke could have taken as a young man. He takes the wrong road, and whatever amount of years it is later in The Last Jedi for the character, he has two choices again, and he takes the wrong road. So again, it just highlights the worst mistake that Disney Lucasfilm made with Luke Skywalker, and it also just highlights the fact that this is information that's readily available to all the creators of Star Wars. Yes, Star Wars has so much lore, so much behind the scenes, but it's readily available to be read and to be consumed. I mean, I'm reading it here as a fan, and I just think it's a shame that the executives and Luke Skywalker alike didn't learn from their mistakes. And I think it's just an even bigger problem that Luke decides to not save the galaxy twice. The first time he doesn't save the galaxy because he's just new. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's a kid. He's a novice at heart. But decades later, he decides not to save the galaxy by choice. And I just think that's a shame. So again, it's not to be negative. I think Disney has made some great content. Clone Wars Season 7, Rogue One. I personally enjoyed Solo. I'm loving the Skeleton Crew. But they've also made some huge mistakes with the show like The Acolyte, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker. And there just seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between certain people working at Disney Lucasfilm and the people that came before who put so much passion and love into this lore, right? It's a labor of love. And I'm just not sure if some of the people who are working there are as laborious as the people before, or maybe even just detail-oriented. But again, the proof is in the pudding. It says right here in front of us, by staying and completing his training, Luke could have saved the galaxy. And he makes an actual choice to not do so. So again, I just think it's weird. But I'd like to know your guys' thoughts. Do you think this is the biggest problem that Luke Skywalker has as a character in Star Wars? And what do you think about this piece of information from the Paul Duncan Star Wars Archives? I think it's very eye-opening, and it was just nice to see that this was included in this large 600-page work by Paul Duncan, which in my opinion is amazing. And if you have the money, if you have the time, go buy it, go check it out. I think it's awesome. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this little piece we talked about today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and remember, the Force will be with you always.